Today is Friday, June the 7th, 2024, and we welcome you all to our Chapter 49 podcast. Of course, Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. My name is Larry Lannon. I am a volunteer in the area of communications for Chapter 49, and I'm also a retiree. We certainly are happy you've chosen to join us, taking a little of your precious time to listen to what we have to say or watch our podcast if you're watching on YouTube or listening to our audio podcast. And once again, we welcome our chapter president back, Duncan Childs.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
So today, I think what I want to say first, being a retired guy, I was home yesterday morning, which would have been the day before we record this, which would have been June the 6th. And I watched the D-Day ceremonies from France, and it was such a moving experience to watch that the 80th anniversary, these men who are still around, some of them, and most of them in wheelchairs or just with difficulty walking, but yet they were all somehow, sometimes with a little bit of help, could stand up when need be, and met with President Macron of France and President Biden of the United States, and there were veterans from both countries and others who were on hand. It was really a moving event to watch, to think about what happened that day. You know, when I think about that, Duncan, being kind of an amateur historian myself, two little things that people need to remember about D-Day, because D-Day was by no means a guaranteed success. In fact, Winston Churchill had been involved in a similar operation in World War I, which did not work out, and they lost a tremendous amount of men. And people forget Winston Churchill was not in favor of the D-Day invasion. He fought against it. He finally capitulated, but it was reluctant. So he didn't really support that. He knew the risks, and Eisenhower knew the risks too. But you know, the other part of this that people don't always know, and historians do bring this up, is that Dwight Eisenhower had written a statement he was going to release had D-Day not been successful, basically taking all the blame himself, saying nobody else should be blamed for this. It's my responsibility. I'm the one to be blamed. Something you don't see much of today, by the way. And that would have ended his career. He never would have become president, maybe not have continued to be the commander of the Allied forces in Europe had that happened. So there were tremendous risks involved. And the people that were, we all knew that there were going to be people who would be lost. It was a successful landing, but still, so many men were lost, and everybody knew that the risks that were involved, but they all did it anyway because they knew the world was watching, and they knew the fate of the world was largely there on Omaha, Utah, the other beaches of France. So, your thoughts on the recent anniversary of D-Day?
Yeah, as you said, it was a tremendous. I did see some once I got home. Tremendous ceremony, as it always is when they have those, and it just, those men and women, because there were women that were involved in this operation, to a lesser extent, and the civilians who gave their lives for the cause of freedom, should always be celebrated. And like you said, D-Day was no sure thing, and up to 2 weeks after D-Day, there were still a lot of issues that they were not sure that they were going to be able to hold. And, might have to do that. They, had docking problems with the temporary docks they had done, things of that nature. So just the guts it took for then General Eisenhower to give the go-ahead in marginal weather to, move forward with this operation to try and eradicate the start of eradication of, some of the greatest evil the world has ever known, was a huge risk, but one he felt was well worth taking. And in hindsight, he was absolutely correct, and we're ever thankful for it.
I hope even when these men are mostly gone, the 80th anniversary, there are only a handful left, that the world continues to remember this very important day and other days. But this, to me, was one of the key moments and in the history of the world, I would have to say. So just wanted to mention that. I have another thing I want to talk about of a much lesser importance. But Duncan, today is June 7th, as we record this. Today is National Donut Day, and some donut shops are giving away donuts and all that. But here's what amazes me. What always tends to amaze me, especially after having been in the broadcasting and the news business and all that, is how many commercial enterprises find a way and manage to declare a special day, some to get some free publicity. I remember when I was working on the air and broadcasting before I got into news, we had a book which had all the days of special days all throughout the year. And every day there was at least one, mostly more than one, you know. There was National Potato Chip Day. I mean, you could go down the
Exactly.
list. But today was National Donut Day if you're a fan of donuts, which I don't know whether you are or not.
Oh, I absolutely am. And, I love to partake of them. But yeah, like you said, there is a day for everything anymore. And my awesome wife, Kim, and I often laugh about it because she'll say, oh, yeah, it's National whatever day it is today. And I'm like, well, that's just great. We're not celebrating National Kumquat Day. That's just not happening in this house. Sorry.
Or National Vegetable Day. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
well, let's get to our issues of the day. We do have a Facebook page. I'll plug it again. If you want to go to Facebook, all you have to do is search under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana within Facebook with that exact phrase, and you can like or follow our Facebook page. We received a question on our Facebook page a few days ago, and I wanted to wait until we got to the podcast to address this. This has to do with the assignment of paper inventory to the remote call sites like Indianapolis, doing the toll-free work. Well, now that we're done with the immense workload of tax season, there's been a move to move some of the work normally done at the processing centers, at campuses, to the remote call centers. And most everybody is in favor of this. This is really not a bad idea. The problem is, and this is what the person posing the question to us on our Facebook page is saying, that this training has been a disaster, at least from the point of view of the employees. They don't feel like they're getting the training they need to get this job done. And what I want to say to that person that posed that question on our Facebook page and to everybody watching and listening, and we've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again today. NTEU has been right on this from the very beginning. We started hearing from our members, and we began the process of taking this to the management. So, Duncan, tell us what's going on at this time.
Yeah, this is one of those things where almost immediately when this came out, great, this is something great in theory. We've been asking for this for at least 15 years in remote sites. We really want this to happen. We really want the ability to do this. And then they roll out this god awful, is the best word I can use for it, shortened training, where it's almost like there are two different languages being spoken. It's almost like a version of Great Britain English and American English. There are a lot of similarities, but it's tough to understand because some of the words don't correlate when you're trying to teach accounts management folks in remote sites the language of submission processing folks from service centers. And they gave in a very abbreviated time frame. The training has not gone well. They do not allow a lot of times for questions. The OJIs are in short supply, if you can find any that will respond. And it's just been a real huge mess. And this was related to national NTU by several chapters, including 49, when this was occurring, when it was starting up with train the trainer. We knew it was bad. So national NTU has filed a grievance on this, basically saying, hey, look, there needs to be some adjustments made because this is not working for the people. National NTU has a shared interest with the IRS in doing having the ability of the remote sites do paper. We have a shared interest in this because it can lead to more year-round work, can lead to more employment in the call sites. So we're for this if it's done the right way. And so far, the IRS in their way they've rolled this out, unfortunately, has been the wrong way to do it. And it's just not been, it's not going to be effective. It's not effective training, which will lead to not being able to do what they want us to do. And that's just the wrong way to approach it. So National NTU is fighting this hard.
As I understand it, initially, NTU just asked the management, would you please stop this and just take a look at it? And the management answer was, I believe, a simple no.
Yeah, 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 that was it. It was like, we bring these issues to them. And that's one thing that National NTU does very, 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 very well is we bring, as chapter leaders, I'll hear something, from like, I've been getting great reports from our chapter vice president, Gail Groves. She'll get information from employees, send it to me. I send it up to the National NTU folks who are dealing with this. So we get it right to the top very quickly on all the issues that are going on. And National NTU does a wonderful job of laying it out for management. And then when you get some, not all, but when you get some of this management that is in the don't confuse me with facts, I like my alternate reality that everything is going wonderfully and this is this is just your problem, not an us problem. That is absolutely infuriating to everybody, from the employees trying to learn to the chapters trying to fix it to National NTU trying to get IRS to see it. It's just incomprehensible to many of us that the IRS won't take a look and go, well, yeah, this can be improved, or okay, we see where your issues, instead of a simple no. And that sort of thing infuriates me as well as I know many others.
We have to file a grievance over this rather than working with the management to fix it. But the management wants to go, full speed ahead. They want this work done. But Duncan, if we as an agency, and if these remote call sites like Indianapolis and many others around the country start doing this work, and the work isn't done correctly, they're going to start coming down on the employees unfairly. And that's, we want this work, but we want people to be prepared to do the work and have the support system there. If you don't have an OJI, you can depend on, because you don't have enough of them. And then if the training just is inadequate, there are going to be problems. And then, what's going to happen is the management will come down on these people, and NTU will start defending them on the basis of, hey, you didn't train these people correctly.
And that's exactly it. And that's what we've advised people to do here in chapter 49, and I'm sure other chapters across the country, is saying, there is an article in the national agreement that says if you did not have adequate training, then you can raise that as a defense if you're going to get dinged. And this is a this is a textbook case of poor training. But even you've got the employees' possibility being dinged, but this is also not serving the American taxpayer. And that's what blows my mind. Our core job is to help the taxpayers, is to make sure that things are done correctly, especially in taxpayer services, as it's now called. And to basically say, okay, we're going to give you inadequate training. So even if you do get these assigned to you, if you can't do them, they're either going to have to be reassigned or you're going to mess it up and somebody else is going to have to fix it, costing time for the taxpayers to get this done. And it's just not the right way to go. And I know that there are many people, including our Commissioner Werfel, who don't want to see things like this happen and aren't happy when when our employees aren't treated correctly. But as of yet, we're not able to get the executives that are in between Commissioner Werfel and those doing the training to understand where the errors are and where the problems.
You might find a little, how should I put it, exceptions here and there. But my experience, and I think yours, Duncan, both of us came out of toll-free. And very few people ever apply for that job or want to do that job unless you really want to help the public. And the last thing you want to do is be on the phone or responding to some correspondence and not know what to do and no place to go for help. To me, that's a worse place you can put an employee in, especially these workers who are trying very hard to do this job, to do it the right way, and to serve the public. So we at NTEU are very much understanding of what's going on. We are having to file agreements. That takes time. We tried to get this settled otherwise. The management was not interested. So what's going to happen, Duncan, I'm afraid, is this whole thing is going to blow up, and management will have to figure out what to do after the fact and fixing it before the fact. And that's the sad thing in all this.
Yep, and that's the particular problem. Pre-decisional involvement to me is always the key. If they'd have shown people on the phone, okay, here's what's going on, and saying, okay, we're going to give new hires, folks we're bringing off the street, we're going to give them 6 weeks of this training, but because you're already trained assisters, you're only going to get 6 days. Well, that's not going to cut it because of the fact that, like I said, it's almost like talking a different language in these types of things, doing these types of adjustments. So if that had been brought to us pre-decisionally, we could have let them know that and made sure that there was adequate time for this training, adequate time for questions to be answered, make sure there were enough OJIs to handle it. Instead, here we are with this mess.
So just the bottom line, NT's known about this for a while. We had to go formal on this, which does take time. We would have much preferred to get this done much earlier in the process, and we will continue to be involved. We will continue to update you on our Facebook page, and we will also update you on this podcast about what's going on. Well, let's go from that to funding bills, because now there are funding bills are now going through the process. The way this works, all funding bills for federal agencies begin in the House of Representatives, and it begins in a committee. And once a committee passes whatever, it goes to the Rules Committee and then on to the House floor. So we have appropriations bills that have now cleared that hurdle at first committee action, if you will, for the fiscal year 2025, beginning October 1 of 24. That's the way the fiscal year works. So what this House committee has done is just they've taken a battle axe to every agency's budget, including that of the IRS. Also, the president, we think it's too low, but the president has proposed a 2% pay increase for that fiscal year, which would really end up being effective next calendar year, the way things fall. And that isn't even in there. They didn't even put anything. It's silent on the pay raise either way. But what would happen? You look across the board. The many agencies represented by IRS, everyone's getting a haircut. Some worse than others. Some don't have any hair left. So with the IRS, you've got overall funding would go down 2.2 billion. That's a B. $2.2 billion. There would be cuts in enforcement, operations support, really the whole ability to do compliance work, the what needs to be done for the information technology, which has been helped by the Inflation Reduction Act, but we have to have our annual appropriations to do this as well. So what this is happening here is that there's just a huge cut. Now, I think this is something that's of concern, and we all need to be worried about this. But I think, and I want Duncan to talk more about this, this is the very first step in the process. And even if this does pass the full House, and it may not, who knows, but if it does, then it has to go to the Senate. And the Senate has a whole different idea of what budgets ought to be. It also has to be signed by the president. Now, the president has already issued a veto threat over this bill, the way it was put together. Even before it passed, it was pretty clear where this committee was going. So we don't want you to panic, but we want you to be concerned. And we, if you choose to do so, send a message to your local member of Congress, because that's where it is now, in the House of Representatives. So we want people to understand what's going on, what certain people in the House of Representatives want to do. And Duncan, I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on this whole budget process as we begin this for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, as you said, it is the start. There is a lot of almost vindictiveness about some of these appropriations. And especially in regards to the IRS, they're hitting the vast majority, if not all, of the NTU represented agencies. But we're going to talk about, the IRS. We're sitting here with the best phone level service that we've had in memory. That will definitely be impacted by this. You won't be able to give the taxpayers the best service. You won't be able to go after the folks who are not paying their fair share because you're going to be cutting enforcement. And it's just, again, the organization that brings in the part of the organization that brings in anywhere from 93 to 95% of the money coming into your coffers, you want to cut that. And that has always been a mystery to me, aside from the fact that you have donors who are, don't want to have this type of attention, don't want us to be fully funded. As you said, the stuff that's going on in the House, even if it does pass the House, would not pass the Senate. And certainly the president would veto it, and it would not be able to overcome a veto. And there are others that saying, well, let's just talk about a continuing resolution, and then when we get new administration in here, then we can really hit them hard. No, Congress's job is to pass funding bills. They need to do that in a responsible manner that will be acceptable to both the House and the Senate, that they would be able to get a majority of votes in both the House and the Senate to pass this, as well as it be amenable to the administration, because you're not going to have enough of a majority to override any sort of veto. So, once again, we're going to be calling on some folks in the Congress to come to their senses, which in certain circumstances seems like more and more of a pipe dream.
And to take this a step further, I want to mention this because this has received some news coverage. There are some people in the House of Representatives, a few in the Senate, a minority at this point, who are urging the leaders of their party to shut the government down October 1st for the new fiscal year, about a month before the election. Most of the leaders of Congress do not want this. They understand that this is bad news, really, for both parties, but one in particular. I won't get any further into it than that. So I think we need to just mention the fact that, yes, you're seeing this rhetoric. It would be a shock to me if the leaders, and that was both parties of the House and the Senate, would allow a government shutdown to happen, because it would be such bad news for one party more than the other, but really a little bit for both.
Yeah, this is a bad example of, hey, hold my beer. This is not something that you want to just try and do, because it's not going to have good consequences for you. Does it play well to certain people's bases? Probably does. But to the American public as a whole that wants to make sure that the services that they've come to expect are being done as they should, yeah, that's going to upset a great number of people, and that's not going to bode well for anybody. So we ask Congress to do what Congress is there to do, come up with proper funding, that's going to be, nobody's going to be happy about it, but that's, sometimes that's the best result of a negotiation. If neither side is happy, but you can live with it. That's something that we're going to need that Congress to come to, that the president will be able to sign. We're hoping that cooler heads will prevail, that there will be more funding, the proper amount of funding, so we can increase this, so we can do things like, I don't know, reduce the deficit. That's always a fun thing to try and do. We'd like to do that. But if we don't have the funding to go after the folks that aren't paying their fair share, we're not going to be able to help participate in that effort.
So let's move on to an issue we tend to talk about every single podcast in recent months: telework. A couple of items on that. The first one is IRS has this chief counsel office. IRS has been, those IRS attorneys have been represented by NTU. They were a little late in the game, but we finally got representation for them several years ago. Their NTEU and the management at the chief counsel operation of IRS seem to be at loggerheads over telework. So what's happening there?
Yeah, basically what's happened is that oftentimes chief counsel doesn't want to play that they're part of the IRS, even though they are technically part of the IRS. And their thinking is, well, again, our people should all be in here, so we should be, there should be very limited, if any, telework. And they do have a separate contract from the rest of the IRS. They do have a separate contract. And that's what they're trying to push through, is to greatly reduce telework. And we are pushing back hard because, once again, and we've harped on this and harped on this, there are no studies showing that once people go on telework, that there is a lack of productivity. In fact, there's an increase in productivity when people are on telework. But chief counsel is trying to adhere to that, thought process. Well, we want to bring the people in the office because if we can't see them, by golly, they're not working.
And let's go to another aspect of this. I just posted this shortly before we recorded this podcast. Federal Times has a story about the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, testifying before the Senate committee. And a member of that committee named Susan Collins from Maine, the state of Maine, started pushing Secretary Yellen on the IRS and telework. Now, the IRS contract says people are, if they're under a telework agreement, which they sign with the management, that you are required to come in at least 2 days every pay period, 2 days out of every 2 weeks, which is a pay period. Most people overall who are on telework are on it about half the time. That's the average, as I understand the data at this point. And Susan Collins was pushing Secretary Yellen to change the agreement. Now, this article in Federal Times did quote Doreen Greenwald, our national president, saying, well, we do have these agreements. We renegotiate them periodically. But, again, like what you have been saying, we're still trying to figure out where the harm is, where the management is getting, is not getting what they need. They're getting retention, and employees are getting more employees coming in as a result of having telework available, and the work is being done very well and is being productive. So tell me where the problem is. So again, but this is an example, and Secretary Yellen had to promise the senators she would look into that. But I think Secretary Yellen has generally been supportive of working with NTEU on this. So I would like your thoughts on this matter.
I think National President Doreen Greenwald, and I know you've got the quote there, put it very well in talking about, hey, look, we've got a contract. If IRS wants to come back in and renegotiate, they've got the opportunity in about 3 years. We just came through our midterm reopener. Telework did not change in that. And again, this is all something and when I've talked to congressional staff, executives, things of that nature, I always bring up the fact that people who don't have mobile work are not teleworking. If their work is not mobile, they are in the office. If their work is mobile, they are working from home. The key phrase here is everybody is working. Nobody is sloughing off. Nobody is screwing around. There are no taxpayers that are being harmed. I would love to see the folks in the tax in our walk-in offices be able to telework. Unfortunately, they really can't because their work is face-to-face. I would love to see more folks in our submission processing, in our service centers, be able to telework than they are. But unfortunately, a lot of their work is hands-on and they have to be there right there. Now they're having more and more work electronically, which should open up more telework for them. But as of right now, that's where it's standing. So everybody that's not mobile is in the office. And that's the point that we keep making from Doreen Greenwald on down. And it just always mystifies me. It doesn't really mystify me, but it always gets me a little upset when you've got people that don't want to hear facts, that don't want to hear, show me a study that shows that people who are teleworking are less productive than they would be in the office. The folks, if you're in the office, you've got drive time, you've got more leave without pay, you've got more sick leave taken, you've got more FMLA taken than people who are working from home. And that's not counting the people who are often working through a lunch or working a little bit earlier or a little bit later because they're sitting there at home and saying, hey, look, I'm going to finish this. Whereas if they were in an office, they'd be saying, okay, it's time for me to leave, I'm gone. So the whole fallacy of you have to be in the office to be productive is a very antiquated theory, and that mindset needs to change.
Well, we at NTEU continue to fight the good fight, defending and trying to keep telework, which has been around since the mid 90s or some version of it in the IRS. So yes, we are continuing to advocate for employees on this, and we know the battle will continue, but we will not give up on this. One last item here, Duncan. Good news for people who are thinking about retiring, because you've been dealing with a backlog at Office of Personnel Management (OPM). That's the operation that processes retirement applications when they come through. There's been a backlog of that, but right now we have the latest data, and the latest data shows at OPM their processing backlog is at an 8-year low. So we're now at the place where OPM was in 2016. So that is good news if you're thinking about retiring about now.
Yeah, that's actually great news. And the fact that we're trying to go more and more to electronic, because it's a very paper-centric system. So the more that we can go electronic with these retirements, the better off we are. The more folks that we have working on them, here in the IRS or at OPM, and able to make that dent, I think is going to bode well for everybody to make it a smoother process so things get done much faster.
Okay, Duncan, time for your final comment.
Okay, my final thought for today is, again, one I like to hit, every couple of months. We're starting, summer is starting, it's more of a fun time, but there are people that are still down in the dumps, feeling bad, not, feeling not connected. And, we really want to make sure that those folks are taking care of themselves mentally, because mental health is as big as physical health. And, like I've mentioned often, I have a daughter who is awesome daughter who is a mental health counselor. And I am a huge, huge advocate of, the EAP program. When you need somebody to talk to, or, just reach out, find a professional that can help you. There's no reason not to reach out for help, not to take your mental health as serious as you do your physical health, because they're both important and many times intertwined.
And if you are an IRS employee, you do have an employee assistance program, the EAP, that you can call upon if you wish to do so. So that is always there and is available to you. And if you're retired like me, there are lots of resources within your community and within your health network, and your primary care physician can sometimes be helpful to get you where you need to go. My comment is a little lighter than that, because there's been an industry that's been around for a long time, Duncan. It's called a matchmaking industry, where they get people together, and who maybe want to strike up a relationship, but they want to meet people and all that. And so you have these matchmaking services. They've been around a long time. There was one particular matchmaking service, and a lot of them are just fully online. This one was not online. This particular operation was online, and they hooked people in. But what they did is arrange for like parties and events where people can mix and talk to each other. But they would charge you a fee to go to this and to be a part of this. This group, Duncan, applied for tax exempt status, saying that I believe their argument was that they were filling a public need and therefore applied for 501c3 status. Now, what do you think the answer was from IRS when that application came in?
I would hope it would be no.
It was a big no. You are in business to make a profit. You are not filling a public need. It wasn't like they were bringing people in for free, or it wasn't religious based. It wasn't based on anything you could define as a public need. So it reinforces my faith in our people in the tax exempt government entity issue part of the service. They certainly do know what they're doing. Duncan, thank you very much once again for joining us. And this has been the Chapter 49 podcast. And we certainly are happy that you spent some time with us today. We mentioned our Facebook page. Please go to that if you want the latest information. We try to keep that up to date. We try to make this a weekly podcast. We don't make it every week, but we try our best. In the meantime, we appreciate you being here. Please be safe and be kind.